Welcome to the webinar, everyone. My name is Glenn Lubert. I'm the CEO here at PracticeDoc, and I'm here with Diane Berg, our PracticeDoc Senior Client Advisor.
Hello.
Today's webinar is entitled Overcoming Patient Objections Using Logic and Reasoning, with our special guest, Jon Hoffenberg. Jon is co-founder of YellowTelescope Medical, an industry leader in practice training, staffing, and long-term oversight. He's a graduate of the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania with over 15 years of experience hiring, training, and overseeing over 2,000 people. Every practice they've worked with at YellowTelescope since the very first year has gained by 60% or grown by 60% or more. Before we get started, I want to let each of you know that if you have any questions at any time during the webinar, you can submit your questions in the GoToWebinar question box displayed on your screen. We'll make sure if we don't answer your question today, we will get back to you directly with an answer as soon as possible. We do have special offers for everyone at the end of the webinar, so make sure you stay tuned until the very end. And with that, I will now turn this webinar over to Jon. Welcome.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate everybody joining us on this webinar. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody. And we're going to go ahead and dive in. Today's topic is overcoming patient objections using logic and reasoning. And regardless of what type of practice, med spa, medical practice that you work in, whether you're an owner, whether you're the physician, or whether you're an ancillary staff member, we always encounter different objections from patients, and we at YellowTelescope have developed a program to overcome those objections using sort of common sense logic and reasoning, but with some more specifics, and we're going to spend some time today talking about it. As far as who we are, for those who have not made themselves familiar with YellowTelescope, you can obviously visit YellowTelescope.com. We believe that it's really hard to chase two rabbits. I have a brand newborn baby, and I've realized that it's impossible to both get sleep and have a newborn baby. And similarly, it's pretty challenging to, as a company, really go after several different areas and become expert level. So for example, with PracticeDoc, you've got a great resource to gather leads and do internet stuff and work on SEO and so on, and they're a great resource for that. It's not what we do. What we really focus on is our one rabbit. We chase one rabbit, and that is helping practices throughout the country to hire, train, and oversee the very top salespeople and practice managers in the country. So everything we do is to impact that profitability. We believe when we teach on these webinars, as well as in everything that we do, that everybody who's on these calls must understand the psychology behind why we're doing what we're doing. Because once you understand the reasoning why, then you can really make it your own. There has to be a belief that we can understand the whys, and then we can give tips that can be implemented right away. We believe in practicing and role-playing through these things. So we encourage everybody on the call to actually practice some of the techniques that we're teaching. We never only talk psychology. We always talk psychology first, and then the actual how and how to implement it later. And we really believe that people are the key to the practice's growth. Your business grows because of the quality. It lives and it dies by the quality of your people. We're not big on fancy slides, no fancy technology, just things that work. Our average YellowTelescope patient advisor has sold over $2 million in 2012, some over $3 million. For 2013, we're pacing towards about a $2.5 million average. Our top patient advisors, salespeople, try to sell at least $250,000 a month. With a 70 to 80% in-office close ratio where people are placing deposits immediately. And one of those keys is the logical thinking and the critical thinking that we bring to the table. So let's really dive in on some of this. We all know, for those of you guys who have ever met a patient or spoken with a patient, that by and large patients are not necessarily logical. And that's not an insult. It's not a negative thing. In a lot of our purchasing decisions, in a lot of our decisions that we all make throughout life, we're not logical in that process. However, with practice, we are able to think logically, and with even more practice, we can help our patients to think logically. And then ultimately, as we'll talk about, this logical thinking does lead to immediate booking if you have a refundable deposit. When we talk about immediate booking, depending on the type of procedure you provide, it could be orthodontics, it could be cosmetic dentistry, it could be plastic surgery, it could be Botox or Juvederm, it could be any number of cash-paid services that your practice provides. It could also be an insurance-based product. My belief is that if someone is doing Mohs reconstruction or breast recon or other reconstructive or insurance-based things, the patient is still making a decision to purchase. Maybe the insurance ultimately pays the bill, but it's that individual's body, so they have to still be convinced. And through helping them to think more logically, the percentage of the individuals who walk into your practice that schedule with you on the spot is going to increase. And again, in every practice that we work with, we achieve a 60 to 80% plus on-the-spot ratio. And we've noticed that in most industries, that average tends to hover around 15 to 20%. The only objection that's very challenging to overcome is if you have on higher priced products a deposit. For example, if someone is having a facelift and there's a deposit and that deposit is not refundable, then it's a very hard objection to overcome because they can simply say, well, it's non-refundable, so I have to be 100% sure, and because I'm not 100% sure, I'm only 99.5% sure, I'm going to hold off. So with that one objection solved by making the deposit refundable, on high-ticket items we suggest something like a 20% fully refundable deposit till 2 weeks to 4 weeks prior, then this logical thinking concept that we're teaching on this call will work in your business. So let's talk a little about the psychology behind this. I think the initial concept that thinking logically is going to work makes sense, and that's not exactly rocket science or something you're going to write home about. The question, though, is what is the psychology behind what we're doing? What we understand from pretty intensive research with every practice that we work with, and this is probably somewhere in the range of 40 or 50,000 patients and tens of millions of dollars worth of sales, is that fundamentally patients think a certain way. And the first thing that you have to understand is the psychology behind the way patients call your practice. So when a patient contacts your practice, they generally are thinking, gosh, I think I'm going to call this place and get an appointment. All they're planning to do is reach a receptionist. The receptionist is just going to book an appointment without asking them any questions. They're going to show up, and then at that point, they're going to gather information. The reason that the patient thinks this way is because that's the way most medicine works, particularly insurance-based. So, for example, if someone has a mole on their arm and they'd like to find out if it's cancer, they unfortunately can't text that photo to the dermatologist because the dermatologist would not be able to receive their copay or their insurance money. So you have to call that office, wait on hold, talk to sometimes unfriendly receptionist, and then get an appointment, and then off you go. So what we have to do is change the psychology of the patient's brain. We have to change the funnel entirely. So when they contact the office, they are no longer just thinking about scheduling a time to meet with the patient, but rather they are gathering information by phone so that they can come in ready to book. And one of the great opportunities that practices have that they often don't take advantage of is if someone is calling the practice and they're looking at a procedure or treatment that costs a significant sum of money, and the doctor would like to increase the percentage of those individuals who are purchasing, we logically have to spend more time over the phone communicating information, preparing the patients that when they come in, they're ready to book. And over the phone, by simply building rapport and then providing a little bit of information about the doctor, building up their accolades, and then asking a few questions about their goals, simple things. You know, what are you hoping the doctor can do for you today? And have you thought about your time frame? And giving them maybe a broad ballpark of prices so they have some idea of cost range will tease out some of the objections that you're going to have to overcome. And an objection fundamentally is an answerable reason why not. It's the reason that the patient is providing to you that if you overcome it will lead to a sale, and if you don't overcome it will lead to a no sale. So perhaps through that conversation on the phone, they have some concerns about the cost, or they're curious about whether your practice offers care credit, or they're unsure if you have a specific date range available over Thanksgiving or Christmas. And so by understanding that they're calling in thinking that they're just going to get an appointment, we can change that psychology to say, well, logically, Mrs. Smith, this is not a dermatology practice that only does insurance. You're looking at something that costs money. So logically, we're going to spend some time educating you on it, which is just logical and normal, giving you some ballpark price ranges. And we're going to try to funnel you into a situation where maybe you're getting all kinds of broad calls at the top, but we funnel them into a higher likelihood of purchase by spending time and speaking with them. Whenever we get an objection, there are a million different types of objections you might receive from a patient, different answerable reasons why not, from I want to speak to my husband or my spouse, to I don't have the money, to I have 3 other doctor's appointments. There's any number of different objections that you might deal with. The key is to search for what we call the talking penguin. So this leads to one of my fun analogies. Hopefully you'll think it's fun too. For those of you guys on the webinar, I'm not sure if you've ever been having a wonderful dream. And it's one of those dreams where you're on a beautiful beach and you're in a comfortable lounge chair and you've got the beverage of your choosing and a very good-looking server giving you grapes, feeding you one by one, and the weather's perfect, beautiful waves, and you think to yourself, gosh, this is amazing. What a wonderful life I have. And all of a sudden, a little tiny penguin starts walking across your view. And the penguin looks at you and it says, in pure English, hello, good morning, how are you? I'm a penguin. And it seems completely normal because you're in a dream, even though this is a ridiculous story and this is a ridiculous thing that's happened to you that wouldn't happen in real life. Because your brain is dreaming, you almost believe it and you say, sure, I'm talking to a penguin right now. That seems to make sense. And at some point, the logic in your brain starts to take over. Maybe it's another minute or 2 into the dream, but something seems to just kind of grab a hold of your head and say, well, wait a second. That's a talking penguin. That's not possible. That seems so illogical. I'm pretty sure penguins don't talk. And it's right at that moment in your dream where you pop up and you wake up and you say, oh, gosh, I wish I could go back to sleep, but clearly that wasn't real. And great salespeople, great patient coordinators, great doctors who are involved in sales within their practice have a very good sense of a lack of logic, where what the patient is saying does not make sense, where they're giving you what I call the talking penguin. And when that happens, we have an obligation and an opportunity to truly attack that lack of logic. We're never going to attack the individual or point out why their thought process is bad. What we are going to do, though, is understand that what they're saying is illogical and then go ahead and attack that lack of logic. So let me give you an example. If we've spoken with a patient over the phone and they've said, John, I'm very much interested in moving forward with this rhinoplasty procedure, and we said, well, the ballpark price range is between $6,000 and $10,000. Most of them tend to be in the middle. And they said, well, that sounds great. And you said, well, what is your time frame? And over the phone they had told you they're looking for Thanksgiving week because they've got the long weekend. And you said, great, well, that's a very busy week. And if you want that week, you'll really need to be prepared by the time you come in to select a date. Because if you don't select a date right now at the end of October, it's going to be very hard for you to get Thanksgiving in our busy practice. Then the patient shows up to their consultation. And at the end of the appointment, you AFTO, as I call it, you ask for the order, AFTO, you ask for the order, and you say, so great, Mrs. Smith, just like we said, the price is $8,000. It's right in the middle of the range I gave you by phone. I know you said you really wanted Thanksgiving week, so would you like to go ahead and place your deposit to select that date? And now we get an objection. And let's say their objection is, well, you know, I know I mentioned that I wanted to proceed on that week, and I really do. It's just that I really need to talk to my husband right now. Well, although normally that would be a reasonable objection and not a bad thing at all, it does beg the question. I feel a little bit of a talking penguin here. I feel some lack of logic here, which is we already discussed over the phone that you'd need to be ready today because you're looking for a very popular date. You'd assured me that you'd be 100% prepared. Now that you're here, your story is changing, and you're saying, now I have to talk with my husband, which you didn't seem to think over the phone. I see a talking penguin. Something's not right. And when we see this, what we call this is a cloud objection. A cloud objection is basically the reason that the patient is giving that sort of clouds or obscures the real objection behind that cloud, the sun or what have you. So a lot of times a patient will give any number of different objections. This returns to the funnel concept on the first bullet point, which is there's a million different things they could say. But what we as salespeople generally know, or should know, is that there's really only two main objections, which is a fear of surgery. There's something they're afraid of because it is a big decision. They're having potentially either a needle injected or a scalpel being touched to their skin. It's natural to have those apprehensions. So they're fearful of something. Or there's a money objection, because if they were not fearful at all and they'd won the lottery yesterday, there's not a lot of reasons someone wouldn't move forward with the procedure. But they'll give you a million different reasons. So for example, if you have a refundable deposit, and it's a 20% deposit that's fully refundable till a month prior. Great. So Mrs. Smith, it's $8,000, but the deposit's fully refundable till a month. If their objection to that is, well, I have another appointment, it's not that the patient's ever lying. It's not that they mean to be illogical, but the nature of human beings is that we're illogical. The nature is that they don't plan to schedule when they arrive at our offices. So we have to overcome that by using logic. So we've done that partially over the phone by giving them some information to help them prepare. We've done that by giving a great consultation today. But if they say, I have another appointment, that does not logically preclude them from placing a deposit with us if that deposit is refundable. So all we have to do is simply handle that objection using logic and reasoning. And one example of that would be, well, Mrs. Smith, that's wonderful. I absolutely encourage you to see as many people as you feel you need to really feel confident and comfortable in selecting our doctor today. With that said, I know that you are looking for Thanksgiving. And although we're not in any rush, there's certainly no rush on our end. If you want to do this in 3 years, we can do it in 3 years. I mean, the prices might be a little higher, but whenever you're ready, we're ready. What I would mention, Mrs. Smith, is I feel there's a very good chance you may miss out on those dates if we don't at least select that date today and reserve it. So you can select the date today, and because the deposit's fully refundable till 2 weeks prior, you don't take any risk in doing so. You then have at least a couple of weeks to complete your other appointment or two. And by all means, if you fall in love with those doctors, you shoot me a one-line email. We can get your deposit refunded. But if you do love us, and we know you will, at least this way you're going to get the date you want. So the way I'm handling the objection is simply looking at the logic behind it, which is she thinks what she's saying is logical. It's understandable because she hasn't taken the time to think things through. It's also logical because she doesn't talk to 100 people a day like we do. And this is the first and only time she's considering having this surgery, and it's a big decision for her. However, because I'm trained, because I've dealt with this thousands of times, if not hundreds of times, I'm prepared to help her to see the light by using logic and reasoning. So we attack the logic right there in the moment. One of the key things for those of you who are physicians on the call, or if you're not sure if the person you have has the sophistication to have that type of conversation, the key comes back to what we were talking about before, which is having the best possible people on the bus and having them in the right seat and really investing in quality individuals. You've got to empower your people. It's okay to be firm with a patient if you're logical, if you're right. And so I know airtight my reasoning and logic behind how to overcome objections is true, fair, and reasonable. I always treat patients with respect, so I'm always empowered by anybody that I work for to be able to make that sale and overcome the objection. Moving on, the key is to begin, now that we understand the psychology and concept behind what we're doing, the key is to now set up your practice to allow for logic. If your practice is set up illogically, you can't expect your people to work within the framework of logic. So for example, if your deposit is non-refundable, and I know a lot of practices do this, and I'm not going to say that it's a bad thing to do. It's just not the way we suggest at YellowTelescope. But by creating a refundable deposit, we overcome the biggest objection that holds people back from scheduling while they're in your office today, which is, well, John, I'm 99% sure, but not 100% sure, and even though it's only $300 or $1,000 or $500, I don't want to lose that just in case. So I need to go back to the office and double check. That alone costs practices on average over 50% of their in-office bookings. Now, the objection that doctors and patient coordinators give to me is, well, John, doesn't that lead to a lot of people calling you a few weeks prior and canceling? You'd think so, but the answer is no. On average, about 95% of your surgeries book either way, or I should say stick either way. You're going to have a few cancel, but you're also going to have a few people who cancel with the lower non-refundable deposit. But by offering a refundable deposit, in our humble opinion, based on statistical analysis, this is going to increase your practice revenues in a major way because it's logical. You can only ask people to be so sure a month or 2 or 3 in advance. They have children, they have jobs, they have bosses. But by getting rid of that hurdle for them to overcome, overnight you can change the percentage of people that are booking while only having a very small percentage cancel. Plus, if they cancel, they give you plenty of notice. There's time to replace them with someone different. Number 2, make sure you have that extremely articulate salesperson scheduling appointments. And this is kind of where I come in. If there's any sales pitch at all in this, it's simply that we run a business and we do fill these roles. And we're not the only people that can be hired. You don't have to hire a professional to help you with it. So whether you ever use us or not is unimportant, but you have to have someone you truly are impressed with who's an extremely good, articulate, sophisticated communicator, scheduling those appointments to help bring them in ready to book and to be able to overcome those objections in a sophisticated and classy manner. Impressive consultants who command respect equals dollars in the practice's pocket. Spend your money on your people. As we mentioned in the beginning, I'm sure Glenn would also agree that, you know, the leads that you're getting, which are great, only make your business better if they're converting into surgeries. So it's a combination of getting high volume of leads, but then also having good people to handle those leads. Let me give you some things you can implement right away to help you overcome these logic problems. So we now understand the concept, which is to look for the talking penguin. Look at every objection they give you. Think about whether it makes sense or is logical. If there's something that seems off about the objection, which is almost everything, then you know that you've got to sort of peel back the cloud and find the sun behind it, the real, true objection. And sometimes that can be challenging. And I think for people who are new at really diving in, there's a great book called Fierce Conversations that really teaches the difference between having a firm and forward and honest and intense conversation and having a negative one. You can have an extremely positive conversation where a patient thanks you at the end, but where you've really covered some very good ground. I think parents are wonderful at doing this with their children. I think bosses are great at doing this with their ancillary staff members. And we also need to be able to do it with the patient, because to an extent they're looking to us and trusting in us as the doctors or patient care coordinators, et cetera, to guide them a little bit. And sometimes what holds us back is our own personal fear of exactly how do I kind of broach the topic? How do I get myself into that place where I'm comfortable kind of being a little bit more firm and forward in a positive way? Well, one of the great word tracks that we like to use is, hey, I totally hear you. Let's go ahead and talk about that for just a minute. That was actually it's a phrase from one of our partners at YellowTelescope, Ed Searing. And so a patient might say over the phone, you know, John, I don't really know my time frame. What I really want to just do is just gather some information and just come meet the doctor, and then I'll decide. Well, in my opinion, that's illogical. So you can't make a time frame until you meet the doctor? That doesn't make any sense. You know, there's whether you want the doctor, that's one question, and then there's the time frame that you'd like some doctor to perform the surgery. So you might be meeting with 12 different people, but you may say, I want to do it in early January. Whether you pick us or not has absolutely nothing logically to do with what time you want to do it with whoever you ultimately select. So to answer that objection, when a patient says, hey, look, just throw me on the schedule because I really just want to gather some information, and then I'll kind of make a decision. I'll say, okay, great, I hear you. That makes sense. You want to just kind of come in, get some information. So let's talk about that for a minute. And by saying that, let's talk about that for a minute, it gives us just a moment to dive in with the patient a little bit and handle the objection and say, first of all, I totally hear you. That makes a lot of sense, Mrs. Smith. And if we could, let's just talk about that for a quick moment. First of all, I totally understand that you're not 100% sure your time frame, and I also totally get you don't even know if you like our doctor yet because you haven't had a chance to meet with him. Now, let's just assume, though, for a moment, Mrs. Smith, that when you come in, you do love our doctor, and he is wonderful, and you are comfortable with everything. If it went that well, in that case, what is your time frame? Oh, well, if I loved him, I'd be looking at this. boom, we've actually answered the objection. We now have a solution to that. A second word track. What kinds of things will your spouse want to talk about? This is a great answer when they say, I really need to talk to my husband first. Great, I know you need to talk to your husband first. I hear you. Let's talk about that for a moment. You know, what kinds of things do you think your spouse might want to talk about? What concerns might she or he have? We know that the real objection is their own, and it's comfortable for them in almost every case to simply kind of, quote-unquote, blame it on the spouse. So instead of saying, hey, I already talked to you last week and you didn't say anything about your spouse then, instead of saying something rude like that, I just leave it in that court. And I say, great, what do you think the spouse's concerns are? And, of course, the spouse's concerns are really their own, and then I can handle that objection. Oh, you think your spouse might be a little bit concerned about, the recommendation that it's about $3,000 more than you had hoped. Okay, let's talk about that. Maybe we can work something out. Are you familiar with care credit? And off we go. I really just want to think about it a little bit. I'm not one to make decisions on the spot. Great, that makes sense. I hear you. If we just talk about that for a quick second, how long do you think you'd need to think about it before you'd have really a sense of what you want to do? Not, just like a week. Okay, great. Well, just Mrs. Smith, because our deposit is 100% refundable, one option that might work for you is you can select the date, because I know that if you do proceed, you want the holidays, and I know that that's a very popular time of year for us, so I don't want you to miss out. So what a lot of our patients are doing is they're still placing a deposit today, which will guarantee your spot for that time. And to answer your concern, not only will you have a day, not only will you have a week, not only will you have a month, but you're going to have all the way until 3 weeks prior, around December 8th, to cancel and get your money back, or simply change dates with no penalty. So you're not taking any risk whatsoever by selecting a date today, because it does sound like you're leaning towards us, right? Would you say you're 70%, 90%? Oh, I'm 95%. Okay, great. Well, why don't we at least get you on the calendar? And then the last one, think of me as your concierge. I think this is a great line because it shows that you are service-oriented. Yes, your job is to sell. Yes, you want them to select you, but it is medicine and we want to treat people well. And one of the great things that you can help a person to understand is that your job is not to convince them to say yes. Your job is to simply help them to make a decision. The worst place we can keep a patient is in limbo. It doesn't help you, it doesn't help your practice, and it doesn't help your patient. A lack of surety is exactly what they're coming to see you to get out of. They're already unsure, so they're coming to see the doctor to get a directive, consistent, definitive plan. Then they're leaving unsure. So in my opinion, you as the practice have failed that patient at that point. There's nothing wrong with them saying no. I love a no. I love it when they decide it's not for them, because that's good. I've done them a service if the surgery is simply not for them. At least they can move on with their lives and not worry about it. But I find that by helping them to make a decision, whether it's yes or no, helps a good percentage to get to yes, even if a few say no. Because a limbo, an I'm not sure, is just a no waiting to happen. So I will say to patients, so first of all, Mrs. Smith, think of me as your concierge. I'm really here to help. And I'm not here to convince you to say yes to us. I mean, I'd love it if you pick us. Who wouldn't? But, we're a busy practice. We're going to be happy if you select us, and we can shake hands or give you a hug if you don't. My job is, though, to help you get the information you need to make a decision. So let's go ahead and talk about some of your concerns for a moment. Does that sound okay? Now, I know you have some concerns about money. Let's either figure out that it's not right for you, or let me help work something out. We have some different finance options. We have some different ways to help you get to where you need to be to make this a reality. How does that sound? As far as a few conclusions, we have a limited time on this call, and I think that Glenn afterwards may or may not have time for a couple of questions here in just a few minutes. But if you ever have any questions, feel free to contact us. Our website's YellowTelescope.com. We do offer every 4 to 6 weeks. We send out a simple complimentary newsletter. You don't have to buy anything at all, and it's free, but it has some great tips on selling and management and leadership. We do have make sure you add us to our safe list, because sometimes we go to spam the first time. A great thing to tell your patients, by the way, as well, because a lot of times they don't get your first email. Make sure you remind them to always check their spam or junk folder and add you there. We do have a forthcoming podcast that should be out in the next month or so, the Yellow Telescope, Yellow Telecast. And for those of you guys who are looking for services from us, we do run a 2-day training seminar once a year. It sells out every year. We're over 50% sold out for next year already. We're currently offering a 10-month no-interest pay program on that sales, management, and leadership training seminar. You can cancel until 30 days prior, so notice you can get your money back just like a deposit, so you take no risk whatsoever. Plus, by signing up by the end of tomorrow, August 31st is the deadline for this particular discount, you'll get $1,100 off if you sign up before the October 31st. Because we lock hotels in, it's in a 5-star hotel, everything's included. Last year was Mandarin Oriental, this year was Fountain Blue. We have to lock in hotels early, so we don't continue with this level of discount much longer. So if you're interested, you can email me at jon, no H in John, at YellowTelescope.com. If people want to talk about our long-term offerings, we do work with practices for long-term programs. Every practice we ever worked with has grown by between 60 and 125% in their very first year working with us. We're not consultants. We really partner with a practice for the long run to help them succeed. Feel free to email me, and we can schedule a quick 10 or 15, 20-minute call at your convenience in the coming weeks. In conclusion, first of all, thanks to everybody for listening on this webinar. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I would encourage you to go back through some of these slides or email us for updates or thoughts so you can implement some of these concepts right away. The key concept is simply to look for the talking penguin. Look for a lack of logic whenever a patient is on the phone or live. Use some of the Yellow Telescope word tracks to comfortably transition yourself into a situation where you can firmly address that concern. And then use your logic, basic concepts, and truth to overcome their objection and show them how they can go ahead and schedule or come to a final decision of no, even if that means other people say yes and some say no, in order to get the results that you want. If you do so, you should see results in your practice grow. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to the CEO of Practice Doc, Glenn Lubert, and thank you guys very much for your time today.
Thanks, John. That was really, really good. I really enjoyed that. The book you mentioned was Fierce Conversations. Is that correct?
Yes, that's one great book, and I've got a new one I'm reading most of the time, but I'm liking that and Start With Why right now by, I think his last name is Sinek. Yes, Simon Sinek, I've read that. That's an excellent book. It's really good. Drives the purpose out of you.
I did have one question for you. In the recent blog post you did that was on PracticeDoc.com, titled Top Practices Reveal How to Properly Allocate Your Marketing Dollars, you emphasized people first and how those successful practices spend top dollar on one or two key personnel. And that seems to be in line with your talk here. Can you talk a little bit more about that top dollar person?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that really there's two things. Obviously, the practices that are successful out there and those that are growing at a high pace, A, they've got a lot of leads, because if you have no leads, it doesn't matter who's answering the phone, who's meeting the patient. And the opposite is also true. If you've got 1 million leads, but the quality of care once they reach the practice is terrible, you're losing tons of money because you're investing in expensive things and then not converting them. So what we talk a lot about on that blog post that we placed on the site is that the top practices absolutely invest in people first. And we get this information because we run an invite-only event for practices that are performing at a $3 to $10 million plus clip per year, some of the top practices anywhere in the country, and they fly into Miami, and we run kind of a 2-day complimentary event by invite-only. And the deal is we get to gather some of their information and share it with others, and they, of course, gather some of our information and take it back to their practices. And the key finding that we found, number one above all, is that every one of the very highest performing practices had at least one extremely high-level sales leader or management leader or a combo who really impacted their practice in a big way. Sometimes it was their practice manager, sometimes it was a senior salesperson. The second thing that we found was after that, it was investment in marketing. But when we talk about marketing, the vast majority of it, and this is not just to build up Practice Doc, but it really is true that they're spending it on website, SEO, pay-per-click, things like that. And in that order, basically, they're spending money on design of their own website, lots of content, on organic SEO through a web development team, and then investing in ancillary websites, whether it is a Practice Doc or a Located Doc, whether it's a Real Self, whether it's some of these others that are out there. I don't want to endorse anyone particularly. And that's really the kind of the 1-2 punch. Yes, magazines, yes, some other ancillary marketing had some success, but not mostly. Most of it was focused in that web sector, coupled with having 1 or 2 extremely high-level key people in their practice who are well-trained in sales.
Well, that's really interesting, and obviously, the online second with those experts really really resonates with us, and that's really what I wanted to talk a bit about is the offer that we have for everyone. We know that anyone who's tried to do a little bit of internet marketing knows what a crazy, constantly changing whitewater of a landscape that we're working in. And what we've done is developed a solution where it's just one monthly fee, and we're going to be managing all that for you, so that way you don't have to worry about all the constant changes. For example, Google Plus today is allowing you to have custom URLs, and those things pop up constantly every day. The algorithm changes, and with our bundled solution, you pay one monthly fee. We do the SEO, we create a brand new website for you, write all the content for you, do all the updates for you, the hosting. We pay-per-click, we have the lead and call tracking, and locate a doc. We write the profile and give you an inbound link to your website and call tracking. All these to dominate all the search results there, and you have not to do any of the work. We do one monthly fee. And so, we've been doing it here this folks here have been doing it here for a long time. We're 15 years, and we're really excited about this bundle, and then we're going to offer a 10% discount on the monthly fee for everyone who signs up between now and November 29th, mentions this webinar. And in some markets, that can be as much as a $7,000 annual savings. So I wanted to point that out, and I just wanted to let everyone know also that we'll be having this webinar on demand within the next week in case you joined us late or would like someone else in your organization to watch it. I'll email each of you to let you know when you can watch it online. You'll also be able to request any of the items and services Practice Talk and YellowTelescopes are giving away in the survey. That will pop up when you log off the webinar, so be sure to fill it out. I would like to thank you all again for joining us. Thank you, John, for your great advice and outstanding webinar. And for any of you that have questions, keep them coming. We'll make sure to respond to each of you over the next few days with the answers. This concludes the webinar, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.